Welcome to Positive Read-Ins. Norman Finkelstein. I've always been a fan of Professor Finkelstein. He's a courageous scholar. He speaks his mind. He's principled. And even though he's controversial because he is speaking the truth, and it's a truth that the whole world conspires to borrow from T.S. Eliot speaking about William Blake. Recently, Professor Finkelstein made some comments about education and Trump's war on wokeness at the universities. Let's listen.
This is not going to be a popular thing to say. It was an easy target because they alienated so many people with the idiocy that was being taught in those departments by half-baked morons. It alienated so many people. I talked to students. What went on in these classes, there was no room for dissent. There was a party line. People were terrorized to say anything critical of the woke agenda. And so there was a ready constituency when they went after it.
So as Professor Finkelstein has said, it's an unpopular opinion, though that doesn't mean it is incorrect. But the wokeness, the woke agenda at universities and in education in general, he believes was an easy target because it was so unpopular. And why was it unpopular, even though he didn't say it in this way? I think it was essentially that people do not like to be told what to say and how to think. They don't like mind control in that sense. They want to be able to freely think and express themselves, and they certainly don't want to be afraid of speaking the wrong way, as Finkelstein said it, the party line, and there's no debate, there's no argument about it. This made it extremely unpopular and therefore an easy target. People were just kind of waiting around for a sea change, for enough popular opinion to sway, and then they could come out and express their opinion. This is also known as preference falsification, waiting for enough people to kind of reach that threshold for you to come out and speak your mind. And that is essentially what happened with the election of Donald Trump and then this campaign to fight against what's being called wokeness. Now, Finkelstein did go on to say that he doesn't support this way of getting rid of wokeness. And I would agree with him. We can't have this top-down approach. We can't have the government telling the universities how they can conduct education. What Professor Finkelstein hoped would happen was an inside-out approach. So from within inside the university, some kind of democratic process in which people stood up and made comments and tried to create change. He didn't really speculate on why that did not happen. Probably it had to do with the fear that people had to lose their job. So when their employer says, hey, we want you to put pronouns on your email signature or something like that, they thought, okay, not a big deal, I'll just put it on. Not thinking so much about what that implies, what kind of implications and worldviews they are accepting by something like that. So really, it's a backbone issue as well. What are you willing to do in order to keep your job, your financial security? And there's a lot. So I think this whole woke discussion, though, is in a larger context about education that's been going on for a long time, a change that I've certainly noticed through the course of my education. I got a BA and an MA 10 years apart. So during that time, I could see the change that happened in universities, and I could certainly see the change even more so when I look back. There's floating around on the internet, you can see a W.H. Auden syllabus that he taught back, I think, in the 50s or 60s. And there's a lot of works there where, and again, you wouldn't see university classes covering that much work today. Now, Finkelstein also had something to say about that. So let's listen.
If you look at the course offerings, In the English departments, if you look at the course offerings in the philosophy departments, this is not English. You know that you have to look very hard. I'm being literal because I am a mentor to several students who I want to see succeed. And I want them to take substantive courses. You have to look very hard to find a course on Shakespeare in the English department. You have to look very hard for anything in many philosophy departments except Heidegger, Foucault, and Nietzsche. You know, their entire departments are just Heidegger, Foucault, and Nietzsche. And some of them will throw in Carl Schmitt. This is not philosophy. So why do I say it's hypocritical? Because where the liberal elites send their children, beginning in grade school, they're reading the classics. They're reading the classics.
So despite a wider, more general decline, dropping off in the study of literature, the classics specifically, maybe the canon, which has been under attack for a long time, it's not universal. It's not existent in all areas of the population. And this is the hypocrisy that Professor Finkelstein talks about, where he says the educated, wealthy, liberal elites, they are sending their kids to schools where they are actually studying real works of literature, classics. And I think this is mostly true. I say mostly. Last summer, I had visited the famous Phillips Exeter, and I was a little disappointed to hear that their grade, I believe it's grade 11 during the entire year, only read The Great Gatsby, you know, a 140-page book or so. That's not so rigorous, but I guess in comparison to only reading a few poems and a graphic novel, maybe, yes, I definitely, you're going to get more out of the former, reading something like The Great Gatsby. What's the importance of reading literature? Why does it matter? Well, this got me thinking about an essay that Wendell wrote. This was actually in 1970. It's called In Defense of Literacy. And it's just the last paragraph that I'm going to read here because I think it's worth reading. And this helps us to understand the changes that were happening even in 1970 and this gets carried on until today. And really, I think this is the fertile ground in which silly trends like wokeness were to arise. So Berry says, I'm saying then that literacy, the mastery of language and the knowledge of books, is not an ornament but a necessity. So it's not just an extra frill to study literature. It's something essential that we need. And this would probably explain why most high schools require 4 years of it. You have a freshman English course that must be taken, and so forth. It is impractical only by the standards of quick profit and easy power. So the argument that it is impractical to study literature, he's saying that that's only if you're thinking you want to get a quick way to make money or power from your schooling. And unfortunately, this is the way that most school is viewed today, just as a way to get a job. And he's saying that, okay, in that sense, sure, it's impractical. But longer perspective will show that it alone can preserve in us the possibility of an accurate judgment of ourselves and the possibilities of correction and renewal. So on the long view, by studying literature, this is what's going to give us the means to see ourselves clearly, to make judgments about ourselves, to correct our actions, and actually to renew. Without literature, we are adrift in the present, in the wreckage of yesterday, in the nightmare of tomorrow. And that nightmare of tomorrow might be the education system, that Professor Finkelstein is describing now, where the classics are not being studied, and instead they're trying to read other works that they say maybe they value because it shows the diverse body of students within them. When really literature, I think all great literature really transcends to the universal, and it doesn't matter where you're from reading it. You can connect with the characters and the ideas that it is exploring. This gets me thinking, what happens when the population only has a small percentage of people who can see themselves clearly, who has the ability to reflect and correct and renew themselves? What kind of society does that create? And I think this is something we need to think seriously about as we move into the future. Well, anyways, this is Finkelstein's and Barry's view of education with some of my own thoughts here. What's been your experience with literature in high school and university? Let me know in the comments. Thank you.